welcome back to the show. I'm here with Luis Majano, and he's the CEO of Ortus and All Things Box. He created ColdBox and Command Line Box and TestBox, I don't know, all kinds of things. If it has box in the name, he probably had something to do with it. And we're going to be talking about behavior-driven development, why you should be doing it, how it's different from test-driven development, how TestBox makes both easy, and we're going to look into some of the semantics of that. And then Ortus is also doing a keynote at this conference, and why you shouldn't miss that. We're going to look at some of the roadmap stuff, what modern ColdFusion development is, addressing the issues that companies adopting ColdFusion have with language shaming, modern tools, and sometimes being hard to hire good ColdFusion developers, and the driving force behind all things Ortus. And I managed to get Luis to tell us a little story about how he came to the brink of moving to Groovy and why he came back to ColdFusion. This was a few years back. We'll also be looking at behavior-driven integration development, because he's giving a workshop on that, and how it's different from behavior-driven development, which got my head scratching for a bit, but we're going to make it all clear in this episode, and why you should be doing it and how to implement it fast. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by slaying the ORM Dragons with CBORM, and why ORM is sometimes seen as a dangerous dragon and how you can tame it. So welcome, Luis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael.
So excited by the Into the Box conference. There's so much cool ColdFusion stuff here, and it's not your father's ColdFusion stuff. This is all modern stuff.
Yes, definitely very, very excited. Over 28 sessions, so it's really, really, really exciting.
So you're doing a whole day on behavior-driven development. So what exactly is behavior-driven development?
Yeah, so I'm doing a workshop pre-conference. We have a set of workshops, and I'll be leading the behavior-driven development workshop. So behavior-driven development is an evolution of test-driven development. So it's kind of showcasing.
I was wondering about that.
Yes, it's an evolution. So it still has its roots in obviously in test-driven development, but more addressing.
For the folks who
Sure.
aren't doing test-driven development, what does that mean?
Sure. So if we start with test-driven development, then we can evolve into behavior-driven development, right? So a test-driven development is basically a process that developers take in order to build their applications, where we start with a test first, right? So we start with the development of a test scenario, right? Usually with test-driven development, we're very focused at the low level, right? We're focusing on components in our language, right? And CFCs, and mostly on methods. So it's very developer-oriented, and it's very, very, I would say very geeky, right? We're always focusing on functions, if these functions work, and then if that CFC has other dependencies like other components, then you rely on mocking techniques to be able to control environments, right? So sometimes these tests kind of become stupid. You know, they're one-liners that you have to be mocking all the time. And usually with test-driven developers, developers really give up. You know, it's really not fun. That's the truth. And it's tedious. And sometimes when you have big object-oriented applications, it can really be daunting to create all the mocks. And sometimes you're just testing an if statement at that point. So it can be really dumb at that point, right? And then the output of these tests are also very geeky. You know, I can't take the output of all my test-driven reports and show them to a client and say, hey, look, I've finished all your requirements, right? It really doesn't happen, right? So it has its issues, right? It has its problems. It has its benefits, right? But it has its issues. So basically what behavior-driven development does is take TDD to another level, right? You still have a process in play. You still start with your tests, but this time we're going to call them, in kind of agile terms, we're calling them specs, right? And it goes through now looking at software as a whole, instead of looking at it as just how you're going to build it in a component, right? Most of the time, it's never one single component and one single method in order to have a requirement like, I want to sell a product online, right? That usually would involve many components, many function calls. And that actually is what gives us benefit, right? When we have these requirements. So I'll take you by the hand and kind of show you how you can digest problems, real world problems, into agile stories or behavior stories, and then how to break those down further into test specifications, and then how to use frameworks and tools to actually test them.
And are those similar to use cases, or?
Exactly, yeah. So it's taking these use cases, which are really are your acceptance criteria, right? If those use cases are met, that usually means that you've done your job, right? Which is not something that you can say with testing methods on a component, right? It really doesn't happen. So it's just showing the subtle differences there, and just kind of hoping that these developers have a paradigm shift on their way of thinking about testing, because what you always see, and you always hear this, is that testing will slow people down, right? We don't have time for tests, and this is going to add so much.
Oh, they have time for the bugs, though.
Exactly. So it's such a misconception. The reality is that if you apply these techniques, you will code faster, and you will be more efficient, and your quality is going to increase. So it is a total lie when people say that testing will add more time for you, because the reality is that it might the time that it adds is when you don't know it, right? When you don't know the techniques, when you don't know the tools. That's when obviously you're going to spend more time, because you need to learn it, right? But once it is second nature, and you can apply even automation techniques at your workstation, you will fly. You will definitely fly.
And just to be clear to people, this is writing the tests before you even write the code.
Correct. Yes. And it's kind of a side-by-side thing, basically.
Mm-hmm. And how is this speeding up the development? Is it because you think through what you're going to code, because you had to write the test first, so you write the code better to start with? Or?
Yes. I mean, you'd be surprised how much your brain exercises what you're going to be building once you start looking at the different scenarios of how to fail your code, basically. So it's a lot like reactive programming. You are being reactive of what you're writing, instead of, at the end of the day, you write everything and then you go back and try to write tests, right? Mm-hmm. So it really promotes the developer to think ahead. And instead of going through many iterations, if you weren't doing this, you do them faster because of that. And your quality obviously increases because you get that immediate feedback. You're not, I don't need to build a UI in order to test my services, right? I don't have to do that. I don't even need a browser, right? I can just test with my IDE and my console. So those are great techniques.
So if you're doing test-driven development or behavior-driven development, how does TestBox fit in with that?
Yeah, so we created TestBox quite a few years now, and it's still very active development. We have lots of roadmap for it, but it is definitely a dual testing engine. It's first of all, we had a huge investment before in MX Unit, which was pretty much the only testing framework in CFML. So it is compatible with MX Unit 100%, or let's say 99.8%. But we already had a huge investment in test cases that we didn't want to rewrite, so those still run in TestBox. And then we wanted also to bring over the syntax for BDD. So TestBox in itself is just a tool to help you do BDD, right? It won't do the BDD for you, right? You have to apply that still. We're just bringing the syntax in order for you to do it, right? Which is basically what any testing framework will do, is bring you the syntax and the right tools in order for you to apply these techniques. So that's what TestBox is. It is an XUnit, what's referred to as XUnit framework, which is for test-driven development, and a BDD framework for behavior-driven development.
And then in this whole day workshop, you're going to be also looking at some of the semantics of behavior-driven development.
Yeah, the first few sections is really also having a conversation with folks and demystifying the whole concept of testing, and really taking them through by the hand and showing them what is the difference between TDD and BDD, how to apply BDD, and doing exercises on breaking down stories into specifications. Then finally introducing them not only to things that you can do outside of TestBox, such as code reviews, static analysis tools, load testing tools. So giving them more weapons for their arsenal in order for them to actually, be prepared. Destructive testing, penetration testing. Sometimes, people forget about security, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, unfortunately they do. In our recent ColdFusion State of the Union survey, I think 2 or 3% of people, no, maybe more, it more like 5% had a penetration in the last year.
Yeah, so it's really important to have these things in place. So we talk about tools to help there, and then talk a little bit about mocking as well, and then really do some hands-on applications for them to actually get into the habit of testing. And I also, a day is really not that much, in terms of hours for them to train, but usually I try to throw in some automation in there for folks. Every class is different, but if they're sharp, usually we end up doing something like Jenkins, adding some continuous integration portions so people can see how they can actually apply continuous integration into their workflows.
And for people who aren't doing continuous integration, that basically means that you're every time you commit a change, it reruns all those tests that you've created.
Exactly. Yes. So we give them all the tools for them to apply that in their businesses. And Jenkins is usually easy enough for us to set up on their machines using command box. So it's really easy for them to start with it and just start with something,
Well, with all these automated behavior-driven tests running, you're making it very hard for bugs to stay alive.
Yes, definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know bugs really cost money, right? And sometimes when people don't see that dollar sign with the bugs, it's when they get scared about it. But we even go through some graphs, some real statistical analysis of how painful those bugs can be in your pocket, right? Especially if you've never did this. I think the spec is about maybe 100 to 200 times as costly if you introduce testing after release. So hopefully that will scare people in knowing that they will pay for it.
Yes. Cool. So let's move on to the Ortus Keynote. So why should people not miss that?
Yes, we're very excited this year to not only do our product roadmaps, which is kind of what we do in our keynotes, right? But I think we wanted to come a little bit with some inspiration for developers on how we're building all these tools to modernize CFML. I think CFML and ColdFusion in general has gotten a bad reputation as of late in the last few years in terms of maybe calling it a non-modern programming language. I was going to say framework. But we've gotten into topics about language shaming and how sometimes developers feel ashamed of saying that they're still doing ColdFusion, and how to bring about new techniques that were not really new because we've been using them here at Ortus for a long time, but just expanding and evangelizing these tools and how developers can really modernize and not be ashamed. But hey, we're up to par really with other languages in what we're doing.
I would say we're beyond par to other languages.
Yeah, beyond. I mean, we're doing container strategies, CLI tools, tasking. I mean, embedded servers. I don't think anybody in any language has done the amount of work that we've done with command box in terms of embedded servers, where we are to the point of what we're calling JVM containers. And we're going to be showing a roadmap on our strategy moving forward with command box in the future, which really introduces a lot of JVM orchestration for containers now. So we are really pushing forward on the JVM in terms of embedded servers more than any other programming language out there. So I think that's our focus of our keynote, is inspire people and show them also the hard reality of why developers don't want to do ColdFusion, right? Which is what we all see. And sometimes the question is, not the question, but the concern is like, I can't find ColdFusion developers. And the reality is that most of these shops, through even personal experience, I remember in an old employer, they hired this young guy, very sharp, and in a week he left. And mostly it wasn't because of the company, but it was mostly because they were like 6 versions behind in ColdFusion. Their processes were so antiquated, procedural programming, and this is the issues that a lot of ColdFusion shops nowadays are not modern. And the reality is that young folks, young developers will not go there. They will not touch that. They prefer to go into more hip things like NPM and Node.js, because there are companies that are doing these hip and more modern tooling. So the reality is that these companies using ColdFusion, they have to modernize. If not, they will basically be extinct, right? And they will not get new developers because nobody will want to go work with ColdFusion 8 or ColdFusion 9 or even ColdFusion 10. Nobody will want to go.
You'd be amazed how many people are still using ColdFusion 9.
It's crazy. It is frightening. And then that's one of the big issues that I see that corporations need to evolve. If they do not evolve.
That's now 4 versions old, and it's gone end of life. Any security issues with it are no longer hot fixed by Adobe.
Yeah.
It's like running a car that's 30 years old and full of rust and praying that the brakes are going to work today,
Exactly. And I think that a lot of these, these companies, they say, okay, we're going to move away from ColdFusion because it's not modern. But the reality is that they're moving away because they just don't want to, remodernize. And they're going to have the same issue if they move to a Node or PHP, because they're going to be in that same rut. So it's really a corporation problem too, that these people, these corporations really need to invest in themselves. And every so years, they have to reinvent. They have to move forward. They cannot stay where they are. And that's the biggest issue that we see.
Well, I think staying where you are it's like running up an escalator. If you think you're staying where you are, you're really going downhill.
Yeah.
You get software wrong.
Imagine not patching Windows. What would happen, right?
Not good things.
Not good things. So that's what we want to talk about, is how you can take these stories and all these tooling and really make a case for yourself and corporations that are running ColdFusion code that is 10, 15 years old, that is procedural and legacy. And most of the times they end up moving to other languages because they feel that they're not modern enough. But the reality is there is a lot of modern tooling for ColdFusion. The issue is implementing them, right? And we'll even have another keynote the next day on how to do that, how to tame what we call the elephants, right? How to make them dance, how to make those elephants dance and orchestrate them into modern times.
That's amazing. And, ColdFusion is still a great language. It's really powerful, and giving it a modern face and having modern tools and techniques gives it a whole new lifetime here.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the language is great, in my opinion. Obviously, any language has its drawbacks and its issues. Any language has that community and everything. But I feel as productive as I would, and maybe even more productive in ColdFusion than any other languages sometimes. So, obviously, I think that nowadays you cannot be a one-trick pony. You have to have more languages under your belt that really just make things better for you. Sometimes ColdFusion is not the solution. Sometimes I have to do maybe some real-time programming or distributed programming. So there's always tools for the job. But for me, what we do here at Ortus ColdFusion is just serves such a tremendous purpose.
So tell us, you said a few years ago you came to the brink of moving to Groovy and leaving ColdFusion, but then you came back.
Oh, yes.
What happened?
Yes, definitely. I think Ortus was still very young in its infancy. And at that time, I think ColdFusion 9 was about to be released. And I think there were just so many issues with the language. And obviously, it was just a proprietary language at that time. I just didn't feel it was of my benefit. So, yeah, I remember my old employer, I started I was the one rounding up the folks to move to Groovy, another JVM dynamic language. Went through the full feasibility case studies of moving to another language, the frameworks that we would use, the libraries that we would use. I was starting to port ColdBox already to Groovy.
Wow.
The only language at that time was Grails, which Graham Rocher was the one in charge of it. So we had already a plan of attack to really migrate and jump, but that time is when the Rilo folks decided to open source their engine. So without that happening, and the introduction of Hibernate into ColdFusion, I doubt I would have left, definitely. And I would have moved into more of a Groovy stack. So wow. I'm glad they made those choices. I'm incredibly glad that there is an open source solution for CFML, not only a proprietary one, and that we have tremendous integrations with Java nowadays that we didn't. So that really was what kept me from moving.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're still here and bringing fresh life into the ColdFusion community and all these tools. So I know you're also doing a session on behavior-driven integration development. So how's that different from behavior-driven development?
So this is like a very cool session. We're doing it with Eric Peterson. So it'll be myself and Eric. I will be doing the first part, which will be more theory. So I will be good cop and he will be bad cop. In that sense. So I will be doing the theory of behavior-driven development, showcase people the difference between TDD and BDD. And then Eric will actually be showcasing the implementation of it. So he'll be showcasing several tools such as Integrated, which is kind of a Selenium-like, but in code. We'll also be showcasing ColdBox integration testing and really demystifying how to apply BDD in modern times.
Cool. So I'm still not clear, when you put that integration into behavior, you've got behavior-driven integration development. Does that mean it's a higher level or?
Yes, and I think that's one of the misconceptions or things that are very difficult for developers to get into when doing BDD is that most of the time when you do BDD, you need to do integration testing. You need to be doing more real-life, top-down testing than CFC unit mocking testing. So they kind of go hand in hand. So we just wanted to do a play on words there to showcase the importance of both aspects.
And then why should people be doing this?
Well, like we discussed at the beginning on the workshop, I think that you would be surprised. Well, maybe I don't think you'd be surprised. I think the lack of testing in applications is incredible. I mean, incredible when you go to major corporations that their software is their bread and butter. It is their SaaS. It manages millions of dollars for them, but they do not have automated test cases. It blows my mind to see that. And it's scary and it's very concerning. And sometimes corporations do not see how at risk they are of introduction of bugs. And they spend so much money on bug fixing, patching, personnel, when they could apply a testing workflow to their environment and just be able to produce higher caliber and code quality. We even have a tool right now that actually Brad did with the Integral guys, which is code coverage. Most of these corporations have no idea what type of code coverage they have in their tests. So it is, for me, really concerning that corporations that base themselves on this software that they build and have no tests. And this goes for any language, right? Not for only ColdFusion. It goes for any language.
So code coverage would mean have all the lines of code being tested, right? Or do you have big black holes in the code that have never been tested at all?
Exactly. So we did a project with the Integral guys, the Fusion Reactor guys, and they have all the machinery inside of Fusion Reactor that talks to TestBox. So you can actually execute your test suites against your source code and activate this in Fusion Reactor. And then in TestBox, you can get a report of all the lines of code that have not been executed in your test cases. And you can even have a code browser that you can actually browse the code and actually highlight and see which lines of source code have not been addressed. So it really will open the eyes of folks when they run a test suite and their coverage is like 10%, right? Or something like that.
And that might either be because they haven't written enough tests, or it might be they have Deadwood in the code that is going to never be run. Exactly.
Yes. And you discover a lot of things. I mean, when we did this tool, we ran it against ColdBox, and actually Brad started I don't know if I would say a poll, or started a bet to see who would get close on terms of percentage on the first iteration we did a few months ago. And I won, so I'm glad to say.
Yeah, and what was the answer? What was
it?
The
Was
percentage?
84%. It was 84%.
That's
in
good.
coverage. Yes.
Wow.
And after that, we actually realized that there's a lot of Deadwood, like you said, that will never be tested because it was old. CF legacy engine information. There was bug reports that were outdated. So it really discovered a lot of things. And our goal for ColdBox 5 is to reach that, hopefully 90 plus percentage.
Yeah, and the problem with Deadwood is that it really screws up your maintenance because you're going through trying to fix stuff and you run into code. You do a search for something and you turn up something, but is it really being run or not? I mean, it's a headache.
Yeah, exactly. But without something like that to tell you, we would have never found out, actually.
So let's move on to slaying ORM dragons. Why do some people see ORM as being surrounded by dragons?
Yes, I think that I always make a play on words with the ORM, with dragons and all these things, because it really scares people away. I think that ORMs look like these untamable dragons and just too much complexity for folks. But the reality is that they're not. They're like these nice, cute pink ponies. But people don't realize that. So in that session, I kind of demystify all those things and also apply a strategy for it. There are ways to get into it, and if you have a strategy to apply, just like any other tool, it really can make you successful. I mean, we can honestly attest to at least increasing from 30 to 40% of productivity due to using ORM. It really explodes in productivity, but it is a tool. It's not meant to be used for everything, right? And that's what sometimes people fall from the wagon because they feel that they have to use it for everything, and that's when they fail. The other failure is the defaults. There's many knobs and turns and performance, and a lot of people say, "Oh, the ORM is just horrible at performance." The reality is that we run it on all our systems, and I mean our average JDBC times are in the 30 millisecond range. So it can be extremely fast and distributed. So I try to really demystify these things and attack it. We also do like 10 steps of how to apply a good strategy with ORM, and then we actually showcase all the different tooling we built around the ORM. So we have our own module called the ColdBox ORM module, which really extends Hibernate more than the native ColdFusion functions give you. So this will make actually work with the ORM fun. And this was inspired from GORM, from Grails, from Groovy, which really allows you to have dynamic methods, DSLs for implementing queries. We even added the ability for you to actually get the exact SQL queries that the ORM was going to produce. So you can actually do explain plans and optimize and improve your SQL. So we really have done a big effort there. And we've gone to the extent that we're also going to be helping out the Lucy implementation of the ORM. So we want to be helping the Lucy guys in actually the direction of the ORM extension. And right now we're even in the process of getting it upgraded to the latest Hibernate, and how we're gonna be working side by side with them to really push it for ColdFusion.
So were you fighting with these ORM dragons earlier? I noticed you had a little bandage on your hand there, Luis.
Oh, yes. This is ORM right here.
Yeah, ORM dragons. Be careful.
The ORM dragons, yes. Yes, no, you definitely fight with the ORM, that's for sure. It's a love and hate relationship.
Yes, but you should see the ORM dragon after this fight.
Oh, yeah.
It had to be carried away.
Yes.
Well, great. So let me just switch gears now and ask you, why are you proud to use ColdFusion?
Yeah, I think that it's such a dear language. I remember the first time I worked with ColdFusion, I really hated it. So it wasn't a love relationship at the beginning. My background was computer engineering, mostly hardware engineering. So my native programming languages were assembly, microprocessor languages, and very low level C and Java. So starting to work with web and ColdFusion, I hated it. I was like, what is this? I can't compile? You mean I just don't have to compile? I mean, it was very daunting at the beginning, but I think I really love how the language itself is an amalgamation of so many things, and how it really makes me abstract Java. You know, I think that I love Java, the Java virtual machine, but obviously there's so many intricacies, and it has evolved throughout time, but having a dynamic language is what I love about ColdFusion. I think that if I would move into other languages, they have to be a dynamic language. I don't think I could go back to static. I think that there's so many things that you can do with a dynamic language that you can't with a static language. So in that sense, I feel that ColdFusion really gives me a boost, especially being with it so many years, that you know all the ins and outs, and even helping now with the open source versions in terms of the guts of it really is great to see.
It is amazing, and I'm impressed with. I talked with Gert a few episodes ago, and they're doing amazing things with Lucy. So, I mean, Adobe's doing amazing things with Adobe ColdFusion too. So it's great. There's so many different people working on it.
Yes, I agree. I think that for us, you know, since we have to create frameworks and tooling for both engines, it is fantastic. You know, I think that they push each other, which is why the competition for me is great, because they really push each other now, and it just creates this momentum between both engines that I feel is fantastic, and it's nice. You know, it's always great to have competition and being able to learn from each other and push the language even more than they would by themselves. So yeah, I think I love the fact that Adobe has that infographic they showed about, you know, how they will be supporting CF all the way up to 2040 or something like that. You know, it gives confidence to corporations that have investment in ColdFusion, that Adobe, first of all, is not going anywhere. You know, they're committed to it, and that I really appreciate and I really like. And they're even expanding, you know, from their API management tools and analytics and stats. I really love the API management tooling that they've developed.
So I know some people in the past have, you know, wondered whether ColdFusion is dying. So I have a question opposite to that, which is, what would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, corporations need to evolve. They cannot be stuck in the CF8, CF9 days. They have to invest in themselves, right? So that's the first big thing, is that these corporations are doing tremendous amount of money with ColdFusion. They need to evolve. They cannot stay where they are. That's a plus. And then the second thing is that will promote developers to come and work for them, because nobody's going to come work for procedural programming. Nobody, right? And no wonder nobody wants to go do ColdFusion, because they don't want to be working with procedural code. So if corporations don't do this, ColdFusion will not be alive anymore. So the corporations really need to modernize. That's the first thing. And then once that is in place and developers start getting into these workplaces, is people need to start building apps. You know, that's what made PHP what it is. You know, it might not be all quality, right? But the community and ecosystem just grew because people were really investing in building applications. And sometimes I feel ColdFusion developers, and mostly because of that inherent nature, they live in procedural land, they need to start creating apps. You know, that's where we created Content Box and all these boxes to really promote the language. Most of the times you cannot go to your buddies and say, hey, look at my closure, or look at my component, look how awesome it is. No, I'm mostly going to say, hey, look at Content Box, right? I do in-fly updating. It's a content store. It has a RESTful API, right? And all this. And that's what catches the attention of folks, right? So those are, to me, the two major things to keep ColdFusion moving forward.
Cool. So what are you looking forward to at the Into the Box conference?
Oh, man. I'm a sucker for mariachis. So I am excited to have a new band this year, and with many, many little surprises. So I won't divulge all of them, but it's going to be big. So I'm looking forward to the Happy Box event. But most of it, I'm really just looking forward to meeting with all these folks, you know, and networking with people, new folks. I mean, I think that right now we surpassed already the attendance from the previous 2 years. So I'm really excited about that, and still about 18 days to go. So there's still a lot of time for people to still register. So I'm excited to just meet and mingle and also get feedback from all the stuff that we're doing and where we want to take a lot of our tooling.
Yeah, I mean, I often find at conferences I get as much out of the hallway track as I do from going to the sessions. You know? Yeah,
definitely. So, you know, we have a huge section of for networking this year, right by the sponsors, and I'm just happy to be able to mingle with folks.
Great. Well, if folks wanted to find out more about you, how would they reach you?
You can go to intothebox.org or ortussolutions.com. And I still have my blog, but I haven't blogged in so many years at this point. But if you can go to luismajano.com, you can find me there. But most of the time we're doing our writing and blogs in Ortus. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Luis. It's been great talking with you.
Yes, you too, Michael. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay.